Chairman, may I introduce Mr. Chris O'Grady?
Yes, the board, my name's Chris O'Grady, I'm a shareholder. I'm also a worker of Qantas, have been for 14 years on the Canberra ramp at Canberra Airport. I'd just like to ask a pretty important question regarding most of the workers with Qantas over the network. The day after the last AGM, Alan, you spent over 194 million grounding the airline, stranding 90,000 passengers and locking out 35,000 staff. Shareholders were not advised at the AGM, and yourself, Mr. Joyce, claimed it was not pre-planned. The statement was contradicted in sworn evidence by Gareth Evans before the Fair Work Australia. I would also like to ask you, Mr. Joyce, why are you still the CEO despite the fact that you lied to all of us about the grounding, presided over a reduction in the Qantas share price by 42% during the last financial year, and despite the fact that the vast majority of Qantas employees despise what you have done to the company?
Thank you, Mr. O'Grady. I'll make some comments about that, then I'll give Alan an opportunity to respond to some of your other questions. Firstly, at the AGM last year, we were in the midst of a dispute, and immediately after the meeting, and you'll recall that the resolutions were passed by an overwhelming majority, on the Saturday morning the board met. In the light of the comments that a number of union leaders made about continuing with the action, escalating the action, the board met and took what, as Alan said earlier, was the only action available to them, to announce the grounding of the airline. Now, the airline was grounded, and the lockout that might have proceeded did not proceed. As regards the other actions that you said that Alan was contradicted, etc., I'll let Alan respond to those because I think they are most unfair and I consider them untrue. Alan, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. And I think there's a lot of misinformation that is actually being said on what happened last year. And the facts, I think, are very clear, and the facts have been outlined very clearly, as I said, in the 6 hours of testimony I gave to the Senate and the information that we have provided publicly. The fact is that the grounding didn't cost $194 million. There was huge damage, as I said in the speech here today, to our brand, to our customers, to the Qantas operation by the 3 months of continuous industrial action by the unions. The slow bake that the unions, this time last year at the AGM, said would continue for another year, would have caused hundreds of thousands of passengers and again hundreds of millions of dollars in damage to the company if it had continued. So it was very clear that there was only the only choices for us were not to continue the way it was going, but to give in to the union demands. Those union demands would have confined Qantas not to be able to transform, to make the changes needed to be a viable company into the future. Or we could have taken the action we did, and it was the only action we could have taken under Fair Work Australia. As for the testimony, talking about the testimony of Gareth Evans, the testimony of Gareth Evans was completely consistent with what we have said. And it's completely incorrect and wrong for it to be categorised and explained in the way that the unions are explaining it. Gareth said clearly that the company plans for scenarios and contingencies, and we're completely entitled to do that. Very consistent with the testimony I gave to the Senate. Of course, we're going to look at every scenario and understand the implications of grounding aircraft, grounding the fleet, and understand what the consequences of that were. There was no decision made until that Saturday. That Saturday, we called the board meeting and the executive committee meeting, and it's well documented that none of our executives were aware of it. I think we had difficulty getting a number of executives in contact. Bruce Buchanan, who read Jetstar, wondered why I needed to talk to him because he said, "Is it important?" We said it was. I think Lee was at a wedding and had to drive back, and half of our PR department were at the races in Melbourne and got trapped and couldn't get back. So we were in a position where clearly that the decision was made on that day. And Garrett's testimony was completely consistent with that. And again, the misinformation that's been spread about the unions on this thing is just completely unacceptable and inappropriate.
Thank you. Can I also say, if you recall, subsequent to that, there was compulsory arbitration, and that matter was resolved satisfactorily to the company. I don't know about the union's view on that, but life is going on, and as I understand now, no customer has been impacted by industrial action since that time. So can I have another question, please?
Yeah, could I just interrupt a minute?
No, sorry. You've had a good chance to say, I'll come back to you if you've got some other questions and give you an opportunity later. I'll give some other shareholders. Number 3 here, please.
Chairman, may I introduce Mr. Jack Tilburn?
Yes, good morning to you at 20 to 12, Mr. Clifford, the chairman of Qantas Airways Limited. Mr. Tilburn has come down from Sydney to protest at this company on nearly every sector, section and division. I'm a very troubled and worried shareholder in Qantas. I used to own, ladies and gentlemen, about 110,000 shares, but because the companies like the Titanic or the new Costa Concordia, I have sold down and sold out to 20,000 because I don't think the company is operating very well at all and there's no dividends. From last year, a couple of comments. I was there proposing to see better conditions and operations and management from Qantas, but it never came. You've spoken about the giant turn down of 33,000 employees. I don't think Old Strong there from Woolworths would close his 1,200 Woolworths stores. And I don't think Raynor from Boral Limited would close all the roofing tiles, the bricks and the plasterboard. This was unfortunately a bad breakdown, Mr. Clifford. But let me go to finish the last AGM in Sydney. I would give you 4 marks out of 10 as chairman. I'd give Joyce as managing director 3 marks out of 10. And for the rest of the board, I'd give them 1.5 marks out of 10. And I don't think this year they'll get any more marks either. On the dividends, I picked up from Joyce's movements of the tongue about, maybe, might, dividends. And Mr. Clifford, you came in and told us about dividends. But listen here. My forensic investigations, Air New Zealand has already made a $71 million profit, ladies and gentlemen. We've made hardly any profits. Air New Zealand paid 3.5 cents final, us bugger all. New Zealand half year 2 cents. The final full 12 months dividends, Mr. Clifford, for Air New Zealand, if you ever do forensic investigations like I do, 5.5 cents per share, Air New Zealand. Us, bugger all, nothing. Last year, this year. I forget what 3 years ago was, but I'll ask Mr. Clifford.
Okay, Jack.
And I'll end up on that matter of dividends. We want them. We should get them. You've got $4 billion in cash. It's our money. We should get a dividend next year.
Okay, thank you for the... Mostly I think there was a question and a request, and I think I highlighted the fact earlier that we are serious about resuming dividends. I think when you refer to Air New Zealand, you did gloss over the fact that Air New Zealand had to be rescued by the New Zealand government with a substantial cash injection. So I understand that you'd glossed over that in your summary, but I can assure you that dividends are important. But thank you for your request, and it's, believe me, truly noted. Now, is there another question? Number 5, then I'll come to number 6 afterwards.
Chairman, may I introduce Mr. Lobb?
Mr. who, sorry?
Lobb, L-O-B-B, Reg Lobb. I've come from Sydney too, but not to criticise the company, but to compliment the company in very difficult circumstances. Now that may sound rather stupid, but in my used for some reason or other, either I was dropped on my head as a baby or something, or it may have been those RAF aircraft flying over to RAF Richmond during the war, but I developed a keen interest in commercial aviation. I qualified as an accountant. I qualified in industrial relations. And what this company has had to put up with, I don't think any other company that I know of has gone through. Staff undermining the organisation. Prior to the last annual general meeting which I attended, there were staff that had been out there telling people to fly with other airlines. People want security. Yes, security of his employment is great. When I studied industrial relations 30 odd years ago, I suddenly found out that one of those fields of employment my mother determined to get me into secure employment was disappearing fast. It was the insurance industry. Insurance companies were closing down, amalgamating, getting rid of staff. My wife urgently flew to London, to and from London, just 2 years ago. And she was very complimentary of each of the segments of the Qantas flight she flew on. Very close friends of ours went to Europe through London, to London. 18 months? No. It was at the time when the pilots were asserting their authority and when our friends received this mini lecture. This company works in an environment that is the least profitable of any segment of commerce. The Sydney Morning Herald on the 11th of June had this in it. And before people get too adverse to it, I've seen these figures as I've read aviation reports. Quote, Sydney Morning Herald, airlines expect, and that's airlines worldwide, expect to post US $3 billion profit on US $633 billion revenue for 2012 calendar year. Now those figures can be fiddled around a bit, but the airline industry, the passenger airline industry, returns very little. I compliment the company for what it's doing in a very difficult, very competitive environment. I would ask one question. I note that reference has been made to Qantas purchasing over 100 aircraft. You do purchase and lease. Could you inform the meeting something of the balance of this? Aircraft are very expensive. You purchase some, you lease some. Could you comment on what you're going to do going forward? And could there also be some comment as how this company, in such a volatile environment, can really make a profit? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lobb.